Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Corey, better known as the Seaman, and I want to welcome you to another edition of the Seaman's Cinema. Sit down. It's funny because I've talked about how I record these, right? Like you watch me watch the episode, and then I go right into the spoiler, but I have to think about things that I would reveal in the non-spoiler, which comes out first. So I'm always thinking about that when it comes to the scoring when I'm doing the spoiler review stuff, because it will have already existed. But I wasn't thinking about the beginning of the video where I talk about something it's the first time I'm talking about it, but technically this will be the first time, so I'm gonna bring it up twice. But small elephant in the room, I get cold sores usually once a winter. The temperature's been really crazy from 30s to 20s to 40s to negatives to singles to 60s. It's been a little nuts here, so my whole bottom lip is kind of not great. So we're all gonna have to just deal with that. But the reason that's happening at all is because I couldn't wait till Sunday to be a little bit more healed up on the old lip, because our favorite HBO show that's on right now dropped today because Sunday is the Super Bowl. What am I talking about? Why don't you pull up a chair? Take a seat. We are getting ready to dive in spoiler-free into HBO's The Last of Us Season 1, Episode 5, Endure and Survive. And I tell you, man, I know Episode 3 was well, actually, before we get going, you're going to be noticing this shirt. Right here, it just says Conquer. And it kind of looks like a little clock going on. Shout out to New Rock Stars. They've got a new... They changed. It used to be Epic Hero Shop. Now it's New Rockstars Nerd Riot, I believe, is what the new. So the NR and NR match up because New Rockstars rock. But they about 2-3 weeks ago, my mom hits me up. She's like, "Yo, Corey, I don't know what this website is, but look at the Nerd Riot. They got these awesome Kang shirts." I was like, "Oh my gosh, Mom, that's the Epic Hero Shop. That's why it came into your thing, because I had showed you the old site." She didn't So she was like, "Oh my gosh." So naturally I jump on, and everything that they have on there right now for Ant-Man and the Wasp is dope. I dropped $100. I didn't even get everything. They got a couple dope beanies. They got a Wasp shirt that I didn't get. I have an Ant-Man, and then several Kang shirts coming. But the one that I was hoping would get here first, and the one I was most excited about, is this hoodie. Conquer obviously refers to our Conqueror, and when you spin it around, oh jeez, sorry, but it's dope. You spin it around. I hope. Oh wait, let's try and move this a little bit. If you guys can see it, there you go. You got Kang on his little discs. And it's freaking. I'll put a picture up. It'd be easier. But the minute I saw this hoodie, I'm a big hoodie guy, especially in the winter. I got excited. I was like, oh man, this thing is freaking dope. I can't wait to wear this all the time, and I can't wait for the t-shirts. T-shirts are pretty dope, and they're on the front. So nevertheless, be on the lookout for Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania gear all over this guy as we approach that next week. I cannot wait for Thursday. But while I'm waiting for Thursday, the Friday before the Thursday certainly gave us some great television. The Last of Us is the best show on TV for me right now. It is in probably a dead heat tie for my favorite show over the last year or so. The Sandman, as you guys know, big one for me. Loved that, and that was word for word, panel for panel, a lot more than Deviations. But this is a show, and I love that Druckmann and MAZIN said it inside the episode at the end of it. This is a show or a world that has monsters in it. But there aren't a lot of monsters in the show, because the show, if you think about it, is your cinematics in the gameplay. And the gameplay, cinematics, there's not a lot of zombies, because it's about characters and people and, human story. And all of the zombies and the bad guys are in the gameplay stretches, which you don't get in the show. So the way that they adapt some of the gameplay stretches to give you the vibes, right? That's the thing that I'm really liking about this show, is they consistently give you the accurate, correct vibes for different stretches. Last week, they took about an hour's worth of gameplay and consolidated it into about a 5 to 10 minute sequence, where it was like you recreated a moment from the game, but then added several different layers that happen at different points in that same stretch, and just like watching how they do that stuff so that you get the story beats that you need to get from the gameplay. Things like, no pun intended, 2, that we had last week, like things like that you don't get in cinematics, you get in gameplay. I love having that sprinkled in there, and then it's recreate the vibe, get you to feel what you feel. And this episode, while I didn't know it would be episode 5, was the episode that I was looking forward to the most, and the one that I expected to be like the episode, man. Like, we didn't know that we were going to get episode 3 because Bill and Frank's story is not in the game, but Henry and Sam's story is. And Henry and Sam's story is so important for so many different reasons. I mean, for me, obviously the most important is what that stretch of time in the game means for Ellie and Joel's characters, and how meeting Henry and Sam impact them. Because they impact them on multiple levels, and it impacts their relationship, and both of them as individuals. And I was just so fascinated to see how they were going to adapt that stretch, because it's probably my favorite stretch in the game. And you go and you think about, like, oh man, the Bill stretch of the game, they changed a lot of it narratively. But even from the gameplay side, like, you lost a lot of that. So I was very interested to see how they would adapt this stretch of story, because it is also another one that's a lot of fun. But again, is one where, like, when you're focusing on your characters and what you're driving, like, I was just fascinated to see how they were going to play with it. And I won't spoil if it's really true to the game or not. I mean, I think watching the show at this point, you can assume it's fairly accurate to the game. And the game moments and things that they build in are just perfection. Like, the things that are right from the game directly adapted, or the things that you see, the little Easter eggs that we find in these episodes, in this one, phenomenal. And then when you talk about, like, what you're doing from a narrative perspective, I'm going to say that word a lot in the spoiler review, because perspective is something that got introduced last week that we hadn't really seen before in this game. Perspective is something that Druckmann plays a lot with in part 2. But after kind of getting to meet some of the hunters, which are just nameless foes you have to mow down in Kathleen and Perry, all of a sudden it was like, you know what? You can humanize these people. You can understand where they're coming from. They might make bad guy decisions in the end, but you can kind of not fault them, per se, for doing some of the things that they have done. And this episode, what's cool about this episode is not only does it play with perspective, but it also talks about perspective inside of the episode with some of the different perspectives that we've been getting inside this episode. There are so many magic trick moments in this episode from a writing standpoint, and, like, just watching how MAZIN adapts this stuff. Like, there is something in this episode that Druckmann, is like one of the things that he's appreciated a lot working with Craig, is that anytime MAZIN feels like he needs to deviate, he calls Druckmann first. And he was like, so I've been sitting with the script, and I've been thinking about a lot about, like, the Henry and Sam story is a pretty big deviation. What do you think of this thing? And Druckmann's response is, it was so good, I was pissed I didn't think of it myself when I wrote the game. And that's the thing where it's like MAZIN being a super fan, but having an outside perspective can allow you to play with perspective and the story in different ways that really enhance everything. And it's, we've talked about this with J.K. Rowling. I think she's a great example when you look at those first 2 Fantastic Beasts movies. While I think there are interesting things in there from a story standpoint, the screenplay is not the strongest, because going from one medium to another, especially when those mediums are very different in how, like, writing a novel versus writing a script, very different kinds of writing. I think it's really, and especially when you're adapting to screen from a book, yes, I think the writer should be involved, but it's important to have those outsiders who love the material, want to respect and honor the material, but know the best way to bring that material to life on the screen. And the change that MAZIN makes in this episode is so strong. Like, both from a representation standpoint, it allows a moment of representation that's just used perfectly. And then the inside the episode, like, enhances that feeling when you get to kind of get a response from said person. So like, it definitely does that, but also from a narrative perspective, the way it changes some of the things and enhances some of the things. I was just like, yo, man, this guy, Craig Mazin, is just like, he understands this world, and he understands how to bring this world to life. And I think what we get in the episode from Kathleen and Perry's perspective, Henry and Sam's perspective, and Ellie and Joel's perspective throughout the course of the episode is handled really, really, really well. And like, you literally kind of understand. And it's one of those things where, you know, are you necessarily the bad guy if you've been pushed into these situations? When you understand some of the things that Fedra did, you kind of get where Kathleen's coming from. When you understand some of the things that Henry has done, you understand a little bit of where Kathleen's coming from, but at the same time, you also understand where Henry's coming from. And being Joel and Ellie, not necessarily taking in the Kathleen stuff, but like, you know, the other story, like watching them absorb it, is a lot of fun, and it's really, really important. And this was an episode that I needed to connect emotionally with. Because it's a piece of the story that's going to have I've said it a lot of times, it's going to have a major impact into what goes on for Joel and Ellie in the course of the season as we move forward. And this episode did it all, man. I mean, from the emotional standpoint, it hits all the beats that I was hoping it was going to hit, and it connects in a way where you're like, you just like, the bonds that the audience is forming with characters throughout the course of this show that aren't Ellie and Joel has been phenomenal to watch. And then you look at like the action stuff in this episode. Shout out to director Jeremy Webb, who also directed episode 4, and his stunt people and what they came up, because this is an episode that finally gives us a little bit of zombie action. And like, we've seen the bloater in the previews. I promise you, that sequence is so much better than you could have imagined. It's so well executed, and how it ties into the game and things that are happening in the story, like, all that stuff is just perfect. And then the performances continue to be perfect. Jeffrey Pierce, Melanie Linsky, I thought they were great adds last week. I think they added more depth to both of their characters, although specifically Kathleen. Kathleen's really the character inside the Hunters that gets the most depth, but the utilization of their characters and their characters to tell us some of the story about what happened in Kansas City, I loved. Lamar Johnson, who plays Henry, Kevon Woodard, who plays Sam, blown away. Just blown away. Specifically with Woodard. It's so impressive, but both of them, you can tell they understand those characters, and they capture the things you want to capture from those characters perfectly. And then when it comes to Pedro and Bella, you guys already know. But this is an episode that I think is a really interesting one, specifically coming off of last episode, where there were things that kind of impacted them as individuals and brought them more together as a duo. Same thing here. There are things in this episode that are going to change them as individuals and also kind of impact their relationship moving forward. And the one that I always find the most interesting in those scenarios is Joel. What Pedro is doing as he's digesting different things in this episode is fantastic. But the same goes for Bella. I mean, the way Bella just spins on a dime, because if I don't spin on a dime in certain situations, I might not recover from the way that I'm feeling or what I'm going through. And it's just, it is so good. Like, my hopes for this show were so high, because when you have source material as strong as The Last of Us Part 1, and you have a television series to play with, so you have time, and you have the creator of the game involved, and the other creator for this show is the dude who did Chernobyl, which from a aesthetic standpoint makes so much sense to see him jump over here and to see him be the kind of fan he is. I mean, these two guys are just, they're working magic, man. So let's get the Sea Maniacs up. This is, I'm not going to rank it between this and number 3. But it is another one for me that is absolute perfection across the board. And maybe the one thing that episode 3 was missing was that 5 on the adaptation side. Well, this episode certainly nailed that. I mean, the video game things, how they're adapted and how they're worked in this story in this episode are perfect. 5. And when it comes to the episode, both from an impactful standpoint, from the narrative, the action and the things that are going on, and just the performances, and just watching these creators work and adapt this thing. I mean, this was the episode coming into it, not knowing that episode 3 would exist the way it did. And this hit everything I was looking for. MAZIN, Druckmann, Webb, Pascal, Ramsey, Johnson, Woodard, Linsky, Pierce, everybody absolutely crushed it. 5 out of 5. It's a no-brainer. It is a perfect episode for me. The adaptation stuff is phenomenal. And then, like I said, what we get from a narrative standpoint as well as an action standpoint, like you really kind of get your first chance to be a little, like, I think I've been scared in the zombie situations that we've had. Really just that, like, clicker sequence, you're really on the edge of your seat. This is the type of shit that terrifies you at night. Like, you have nightmares. Like, oh, man, I understand why people didn't win. This episode explains a lot of that stuff. But, like, what they're doing with the zombie stuff, and we seen the bloater in the preview. I'm going to tell you, does not disappoint. So 5 out of 5 for the Sea Maniacs. You see them, they're on a 5. 5 of my little heads. 5 out of 5 for the Seaman adaptation and the episode. This one was tremendous. Did everything I was looking for. I'm going to shut up now. I'm going to flip it over to you guys. I want to know what you're thinking. If you haven't played the game, what did this episode do to you, man? I mean, I think people who played the game knew what this episode was going to do, so you might have been prepared. I want to know if being prepared for this episode did anything for you. And like I said, if you didn't, where does this one hit for you, man? There's some stuff going on that's just fascinating from a narrative standpoint and the different things they're discussing to what this means for Ellie and Joel. And if you've played the game, what did you think of this adaptation? Was this, if you were missing the Bill, Ellie, Joel stuff from episode 3, does this kind of make up for it with how well I think, and I hope you think they did with adapting the Henry and Sam stretch over this episode and this whole stretch, these 2 episodes together? Absolutely phenomenal. So anything you guys are thinking, man, good, bad, indifferent on The Last of Us Season 1, Episode 5, Endure and Survive, put it down below in the comment section. Look forward to talking to you down there. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you're new, you want to come hang out with the Seaman anytime we're talking movies, TV, trailer reactions, you want to be here next week. 9 days now we got to wait for episode 6. You like my coverage, you want to be here for my reactions on The Last of Us, you know that's coming next week. I got some reviews. There's a trailer that came out today that I didn't get to check out, Fast 10. So you want to be here for any of those things. You just do the vibe. You want to show a little love and support. Well, hey, come join Sea Maniac Nation. Super easy. Just jump over there, hit that subscribe button, hit that little bell if you want those alerts. And until next time, for the Seaman's Cinema Sit Down, I've been the Seaman. I'm signing off. Peace. Oh, you guys are still here. You snuck up on me. You must be looking for more of this guy. Well, I got 2 video options for you, man. Right up here and right over here. And if you want all those Seaman goodies, well, hey, come join the squad right on over there, and I'll catch you on the next one.